Hi, and welcome to the How to Survive Healthcare podcast. I'm your host, Kayla Thompson-Riviere, seasoned critical care RN turned independent patient advocate. Tune in every week so that you can learn the things about the U.S. healthcare system that no one ever tells you. That way that you can get the most from it and optimize your health outcomes. Now, of course, this podcast is strictly to inform and entertain and should never be taken as a substitute for medical advice. Let's dive right in. All right. Well, welcome back to another episode of How to Survive Healthcare. I have a special guest with me today. Should have asked to clarify how you say your name. Don't let me butcher it. It's Ilyana
Ilyana
Kadushin.
Kadushin.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for being here with us, and I'll let you take the floor and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I am the founder and executive director of a nonprofit called Stories Love Music that was originated in New York, which has an interesting story. And then it was founded down here on the Eastern Shore in 2017. And it started in New York because of Hurricane Sandy, actually. So I take you to 2012, big hurricane hit New York. Decimated a lot of senior citizen facilities actually that were along the water. And so those displaced seniors were put up in hurricane shelters all over New York. My husband and I, who are musicians and were musicians in New York as well, were asked, like many other artists and performers, to come into these shelters and provide some joy, some levity in a pretty bleak and scary situation where people with all sorts of physical, mental health and emotional issues were all sleeping in these shelters. And we were there.
Imagine.
Yeah, like lying on cots in this giant YMCA and fluorescent lights overhead and, pretty stark.
Right. You see pictures, but to actually live that experience, I don't think I can quite imagine it.
And when you walk into that space as someone that's getting to go home to your home, you walk into that space, it was a real visual reminder of how many senior citizens are in the country. It was an immediate sort of like, oh yeah, like there's a lot of senior citizens now and will be growing, and who's taking care of them, and they're having special health issues. So we were performing a concert for the seniors in this shelter, and we were playing one of our songs, an original song called The Joy of Life. And we just sort of wrung out the last chord, and the chorus is, the joy of life is here with you today. And this woman stood up. She was probably in her, mid to late 70s and blind and had been in the shelter already for a while. And she was like, can I speak to you all today? This music and you being here. I said, absolutely. So she stood up and she said, when you play music for us as you're doing, it makes us feel that no matter what's going on around us, what's happening and how we've been, we're scared and we don't know, what's going to happen to us next. And we don't, this storm, this whole experience, but it makes us feel like somebody sees us, somebody recognizes us, hears us. She goes, now you've reminded me that I can find the joy of life even in this situation. And we walked out of that very touched as human beings and as musicians, so much so that led us to, my husband and I both, about 5 years in New York City in total of doing field work as musicians, where we were going into memory units and Alzheimer's units and hospitals and places in Brooklyn and Manhattan and New York. And it basically experimenting, playing songs, coming up with what I would eventually call creative engagement, which is what I now teach, and seeing its impact not only on the seniors with memory impairment, but also the staff, whether they be professional caregivers or family caregivers. So we took that 5 years of experience. That is really what gave birth to the nonprofit Stories Love Music, is how can art, specifically music, bridge something in an area of healthcare. Now, this was before I'd even really heard Johns Hopkins. They created this whole neuro arts community where art modalities, art therapy modalities are meeting the challenges of neurodegenerative disease. And I had just just heard about it. I was going to conferences, listening to neuroscientists and music therapists and hearing them say, with issues like dementia, with autism, with Parkinson's, we are seeing incredible results in research about the impact of music. So that
Right.
is what gave birth to our program, The Joy of Creative Engagement for Caregivers, which we have since 2017 been providing to professional and family caregivers, teaching them how to use creative engagement, and I'll define that, but how for them how to use that for self-care and stress management, because we're seeing really unbelievable retention percentages and burnouts, and especially in the sector of memory care and senior care. And then once they learn how to use it for self-care and stress management, to use it strategically for the greatest challenges in memory care.
That's awesome. Wow. What a gift. And to be able to follow that calling and turn it into a full-fledged program, that's beautiful.
It was very powerful to say, how can the arts, how can I, as someone in music, what's the innovation here, or what's the connection in healthcare? And as I've said, in the last 10 years since I've been doing this, because I've been doing this for now more than 10 years, that's neuro arts movement, and just people are looking at their stories in popular culture that are showing all these art things, whether it was a big story like Tony Bennett, let's say, for example, and his diagnosis with Alzheimer's, and still being able to, up to the very end, go on stage with Lady Gaga and perform and arrange and conduct a massive concert and come off stage and not know anything else. So it's the zeitgeist in popular culture of people understanding that has grown a lot since I started this.
It's interesting. And for those of you who may not know, there's actually different pathways in the brain for speech and language, versus like speaking and singing. It's different pathways. So for some people, you mentioned autism, and that's where I've actually heard this recently. Some people with autism have trouble or have been told that they'll be completely nonverbal, but when you put communication in the form of song, well, now they can sing. And so it's very interesting. So if you are caring for somebody who is finding difficulty with speech, it may be something to try. So maybe you could speak more about that, Ilyana.
100%. The first time I heard it at that conference, the Institute for Music and Neurological Function in New York, is the first time I heard a neuroscientist say something about, is it aphasia, right? In those kind of diseases where that verbal capability seemingly shut down. And we very much experienced these, I'll call them miraculous situations during those 5 years of field work, my husband James and I, where we would be working with people in late stage Alzheimer's who really had no verbal capacity or were not speaking very much. And during the course of the engagement, the creative engagement that we would do with music, they would not only start singing the lyrics to songs, but it would lead to other types of verbal engagement where they would suddenly be speaking. I have so many illustrative stories during that field work of people who went from nonverbal to verbal. As I like to say, the music is the doorway, it primes the pump. So actually, we not only teach care professionals and caregivers how to use music, but then how to use music for verbal prompting. We teach them specifically once, I'll tell you about the program, but once they get to the part of the program where they're learning how to set up a music engagement session with their patient or their loved one, it's not about just the music alone. They learn how to use the music, the meaning, the emotional expression that comes out of people when they listen. Could be sadness, could be elation, joy, even anger, depending on what's going on for them if they're in pain. And then the care person learns how to use that verbal, how to verbally prompt in what's inspired by the music. So that is a great example that you bring up of something that shifts I just want to take a moment to define, since our program is called a creative engagement program, like, what does that mean?
Yeah,
Everybody,
absolutely.
everybody knows the word creative,
Mhm.
right? We define it in my program or in my talks, we're like, oh yeah, what does it mean to be creative? How do I feel when I'm creative? And then we'd spend equally amount of time defining engagement. Like, what does it mean to be engaged? How do you feel when you're engaged? How do you know you're engaged? How does that feel in your body, in your brain, in your emotional life? So once we define both of those words, then we look at them together. So if somebody says, I define creativity as, out of the box thinking, using my imagination, using all my senses, engagement, I know I'm engaged because I feel uplifted in my body, or I feel in touch with my
Mhm.
emotions, or I suddenly feel like I understand what's happening more. I'm aware, I'm in the moment, things are timeless. So once we put those words together, people go, oh, okay, it's not about putting on music for somebody and walking away.
Right.
It's not about putting a coloring book in front of them and walking away. The best, therapists or artists will tell you that creative engagement is actually using the creative tool with the person. And that's the thing that we train people how to do, because not everybody's comfortable with that.
Right. And it almost sounds as if the goal is really to find another pathway for communication, almost like how
Mm-hmm.
you would use sign language for somebody who can't speak, or sort of a similar concept. And correct me if I'm wrong.
Communication, everybody. So if you ask family caregivers and professional caregivers who are taking care of someone with dementia, Alzheimer's, some sort of very clear memory impairment, they will tell you that they want cooperation with care, right? They want to be able to move people through the
Right.
tasks, whether it's hygiene, medicine, eating, going to the doctor, engaging in activity. They want all this cooperation, right? But everybody knows, if you look at the research, or you just look at the definition of what's going on in the brain with dementia, it so easily can go into a battle.
Mhm.
And when I created this program, it was because I attended in New York City, the Alzheimer's Association's New York chapter was holding dementia care training. And I was granted permission to come in and audit that training,
Oh,
basically with a group of home health aides, that were in somebody's home professionally, but taking care of someone with Alzheimer's.
right.
And there were mega battles. There were battles between them and the person with dementia. There were battles with them and the family members. I mean, it was just a hotbed of stress. So I listened. I took the training, got the certificate along with them, but I really was paying attention to how much stress, how much frustration, how much anger these care providers were feeling. And I thought to myself, oh, they need to deal with themselves first in this
Mhm.
situation so that they don't burn out and lose their compassion and give bad care. So that's why my program is 5 modules. The first 2 modules are all about them. We ask them to take their caregiver hat off, their health provider hat off, and just be a human being. And we help them remember their deep relationship with music. And then once they remember, oh yeah, I grew up and they're from all these different cultures. I mean, people that
Mhm.
work in healthcare are from around the globe. They have these different cultures and stories and connections. They go, oh, this is valuable. Okay, then we teach them, how do you use music with yourself when you're feeling stressed out? When you need to regulate your stress, when you need to take care of yourself on the job or when you're at home. Only then do we get to the third and fourth and fifth modules, which are all about identifying those greatest challenges. Like you said, communication is challenging, cooperation is challenging. There are some very challenging moments that we would witness in our fieldwork of even physical and emotional violence
Mhm.
that can come out with people with dementia
Right.
against their caregivers, which
Right.
adds compound pressure, which is why people are burning out and quitting.
Yeah.
So we say to them, we get it. Let's figure out a way for you to regulate your stress and connect with yourself. Identify that you feel lonely and frustrated in this work. You feel taken for granted. Let's bolster you up so that you can then strategically know the value. You can know the value and strategically use music in those moments that are the most challenging, as you say, where you cannot use traditional communication skills.
Sure. Yeah, that's awesome. Well, on that note, would you like to share a bit more about your program?
Yeah, I want to share something that was wonderful that we accomplished during the pandemic.
Oh, sure.
Which was a pilot study that we were actually able to pull off, which was incredible. It was supposed to be in person. And then during the pandemic, as many of these hospitals and nursing homes and assisted livings, constant COVID outbreaks. So we pivoted and put the training so that we could do it online via Zoom, like we are right now. And we worked with 12 nurses at Deer's Head. It was very impressive that facility, and this is essentially what it takes for us to do this program anywhere, which is it takes the buy-in from the people that run a place, from the people that are in charge of staff, and who say, this is going to be a scheduling Hail Mary, but we're going to get 12 nurses to show up on Zoom and take the training. So we did, and we took them through the 5 modules, and we did them once a week for 5 weeks so that they had some time in between the modules to apply what they were learning, both at home for their self-care and then on the job. The 5th module, when we came back, was their opportunity for these nurses to come and share their experience and talk about what they found for self-care and stress management. How did it change the morale of the unit on the job? And then additionally, how did it change the care and the relationship with the people they care for? Some wonderful things that came out of that pilot study, which we have a pilot study poster that we have on our website that people can go and check out. But the highlight is really that they came back and said, the head of nursing and the head of staff said, wow, one of the first things we noticed during the course of this pilot study is that the mood and the energy of the nurses unit changed. There was some camaraderie, some team stuff. This is very much about team building for professionals who are on, whether they're on a memory unit or they just are in a hospital where they take care of some people with dementia. The mood of the unit changed. People were trying out things with themselves and then really understanding the value and then using it on their patients. And one of the best stories was a nurse who had a patient that she had to bathe. And pretty continuously, this patient's response to being undressed and bathed with dementia was to have massive outbursts, to get very upset, to lash out at the nurse. And it was a very stressful experience for both of them, for the patient and for the nurse. And she would, I'm sure, dread it. And have a lot of anxiety around it. And that builds the compound pressure that leads to burnout. She came back for the 5th module where they get to share how the tools have impacted them in the application. And she said, I first tried it with myself, the self-care, and I really understood how powerful it was for me. So then I realized I really need to use it with this patient strategically. And she invited this woman to shower using the music engagement techniques, which is it's the biggest mindset shift people have to make, which is, it seems so antithetical. I'm in these moments that are physical or challenging and somebody's battling me. How am I supposed to use this? The great thing is that we teach people, sometimes they don't need any tools at all. If you don't have a music player nearby or a music instrument, you always have your own voice. And so what we teach and what she did was she found a way to actually play some music in this patient's room to invite her. And she said that the patient's demeanor changed completely, did not have the same response, not only didn't battle the nurse, but enjoyed herself. Because when you connect deeply with the person with dementia and then you ask them to do something, That cooperation is born out of pleasure and connection,
Right,
as
right.
opposed to a battle. The amygdala is already overfiring, saying danger, danger, danger. This person wants to do something to me and it's going to be terrible.
Right.
Um, so that's a good example for you in that pilot study. And we've worked with so many groups, both family and professionals before and since, where that's what we're looking for. We're looking for the value to start in you. Oh, when I do my self-care playlists, whether I'm a family caregiver or nurse or I work in assisted living, I do those playlists and I cry when I need to cry. I know the music. We help them find really intentional music playlists, which is the best piece of advice I could give your listeners, your viewers, to start if they're a healthcare person. Start with yourself. Start with a way to create a playlist that will give you what you need in your life. Like maybe a list that
Absolutely.
allows some emotional expression, that allows you to dance and lighten up when things have gotten heavy. Even release anger. I've even had some professional caregivers that say they know some music that just lets them like do the proverbial screaming in the pillow.
Right, right.
Once they do that, they go, wow, this is a powerful tool. And they
Hmm.
understand how it can be a tool
Yeah.
in caregiving.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of caregiving of any kind, it's not even limited to caregiving of the elderly person. But it's absolutely critical that we keep in mind that oxygen mask theory. You know, if the airplane's going down, you have to put the mask on yourself before you help anybody else. And self-care is often can be depicted or twisted as selfish, and really it couldn't be further from the truth. um, it's something that I myself have to remember to prioritize. I have a 4-year-old and a 3-month old, and I'm running this business and still working and still, being a wife and running the house. And I have to be very intentional to remember to, refill my cup. You can't pour from an empty cup. That way
Yes,
I
that
can
is.
continue to show up and be that empathetic, loving mother and advocate and wife and do all of the things. It starts with taking care of myself first. So anybody who's listening, do not ever feel bad for participating in self-care. And actually, to the contrary, make sure it's a priority. Put it on your calendar if you have to and set a reminder, but you have to take care of yourself first.
And it's interesting because I've been talking to some educational institutions because Stories Love Music wants to we're going to be partnering with Salisbury University. We hope to be partnering with
Awesome, awesome.
any educational institution around here that has a big nursing program, that has programs that train people, whether that's specifically in elder care and memory care, but just in general. What I'm hearing is that the programs, while some purport to have the wellness material or curriculum, or let's say there's now a mandate really in a lot of curriculums that you have to have a caring for the caregiver content, that you have to have content for managing the challenging behaviors in dementia. And when I ask nurses or ask anybody in healthcare professional, do they feel like the current trainings or curriculum are really meeting the mandate in terms of wellness, caring for the caregiver, managing challenging behaviors? I hear no.
Right.
I hear that the curriculums are already very full. They are. Nursing curriculums are jam packed. So the reality is that what I'm hearing is yes, we know we need training like this that truly focuses on wellness, and then also the unique challenges that come up in memory care, because whether you are intentionally working in a memory unit or you're in a hospital, you're going to cross paths with it, and you need
Absolutely.
to understand it. It's very specialized care. So what you're saying about wellness is sometimes that gets overused. It becomes like
Hmm.
just a word. Um, but I'm like, this is a training where we truly teach people to value that.
Yeah, that's awesome. So if there's somebody out there listening who is like, wow, I absolutely see the benefit and I need a program like this, how can they get in touch with you?
So number one, I want to say if they happen to be working in a facility like a nursing home, an assisted living that has memory care, but even if you're also, like as I said, working in a hospital or where you are going to come in contact, or you're a family care person, this is for all of them. Even social work, music therapists, we cross paths with a lot of those different fields in healthcare. So number one, I would encourage people to go to our website, storieslovemusic.org, and sign up for our list, because we will then notify people when there are trainings that are open for them. As I said, we're partnering with SU, and we will be doing CEU events, which will be so if people want to hear about those, where they can take this full program and get CEU, go to our site, sign up. But let's say you are someone that is in charge of staff or care manager or somewhere where you're like, oh, I actually have a group, because we don't at this point have capacity to do just one-on-one training with one healthcare provider. It's more of like, if somebody contacts us, let's say on the site, and says, I have, it needs to just be a minimum of, let's say, 8 people and a maximum of 20. We have a group of people that we would love to get this training. They can reach out to us, tell us what the circumstances are, and we can kind of custom make and adapt the delivery of this program. It's 5 modules, but we can adjust the delivery of it based on the group and their needs. And so that's my sort of biggest piece of advice, is go to the site, sign up to hear about the different events and opportunities. And yeah, I would say that's a great way to start.
I love that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you have any other questions for me about any of this?
I don't think so. You've done such a wonderful job explaining this, and I love that you're here doing this, because especially that last part you said, you're right. There's a lot of things in curriculums and just out there in general that talk about, or I would say really talk around wellness. They throw around the word and mention it, but it isn't truly prioritized. And perhaps there's some things built into the curriculum so that they can check the box that, they talked about it and they mentioned it, but often it doesn't give the deep, meaningful work that you're out there doing. So thank you.
Yes. And I mean, your podcast, and you're talking about advocacy in a lot of different ways, right? So what we've noticed over time, with every passing year, we keep hearing the statistics about around the employee retention, specifically in senior and memory care, nursing shortages there, people not staying on the job longer than 90 days. That is alarming, considering the amount of seniors and seniors with dementia that need to be cared for. So what we're turning around and saying as an advocacy, essentially a program that's related to advocacy, because we're saying this is a very important workforce. These staff people that are working in this field of health are very important to our country, to our elder population. So this is a workforce issue. And people might look at an arts organization like ours and an arts program and relegate it as some sort of alternative therapy. But you talk about really, going the distance with wellness. What we're saying is, if you expect from this caregiver population personalized care, right? People spend a lot of money to go into some of these facilities with memory care, and they expect quality personalized care, but we are depersonalizing the training that we're giving staff.
Yeah.
The kind of staff that they're getting is highly depersonalized. They're watching videos that they can frankly be folding laundry and painting their nails during. And they're saying that they're kind of boring trainings. When they take our training, they're like, oh my gosh, like this is kind of what we always hoped trainings and programs would feel like. So when you personalize training, you can then get personalized care. So we have to reconnect those dots again if we truly want to address the workforce issue that we're having right now in memory care. So yeah, I also urge anybody listening that feels passionate about what I'm saying and this particular topic, like, we'd love for you to also reach out to us, because we feel like advocacy in our work is very important. We're not just out there pushing this program, and our program is always free for the caregivers. We may ask facilities to incentivize and pay their staff to take our training, but we never want finances to be a barrier for people getting our training. This is truly about advocacy and shifting the needle in this.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. And for everybody listening, again, that's storieslovemusic.org. Go there, sign up, get on the mailing list. I'm going to do that as soon as we get off of here. And I'm also checking the show notes. I'm going to share the link for that pilot study poster that you had mentioned. So thank you again so much for your time, and I will see you all next week.